Okay, thank you for that, and good evening, everybody. My name is Marco Winters. I'm head of animal genetics for AHDB Dairy, and in my role, I'm responsible for the genetic and genomic evaluations of cattle in the UK. So whenever you pick up a bull catalog and look at the bull proofs, that data comes from AHDB and will have run through our department. And Fern works alongside me, but later on she can introduce herself. So what we thought we'll do today is to give you a brief overview of the new traits that have been released in the last 12 months. Some of those came in, well, one of them came in April last year, and then 3 of them was in the April proof run we just had this year. I'll then briefly talk about changes that will come up in the August evaluation run, and that's mainly related to the economic indexes that we have got. And then Fern will take over and start to talk about using the herd genetic reports, but also how that links to the optimal dairy systems which AHDB Dairy launched last year. But before I start, I just wanted to, set the scene and just to make you think about why we're talking about genetics and why we believe that genetics is really critical to when it comes to on-farm performance. Basically, we know that the cow's genetics are the basis of her performance, and for that reason, do you know the genetics of your own herds? Or if you're an advisor, do you know the genetics of your clients' herds that you're working with? Because really, these things are critical and are the foundations that you start working from. And if you get your genetics right, the rest of the job will become a lot easier. And the same is true if you get your genetics wrong, your job will probably be a lot harder. So really thinking about genetics and thinking about your genetic strengths and weaknesses is important, and Fern will come back to that later on when she talks about the herd genetic report and how you can find out for yourself where your herd sits. And then the final question, I guess, is another one which we come up against quite a few times, is that farmers a lot of the time are being sold to semen and they may not really be in control of their own destiny. And we do believe that it is important that you really think about buying semen, and of course, you want to discuss it with your breeding consultant or a semen rep, but make sure that you understand what it is that you're buying, because it is important for your own future and the performance of your herds in the future. So the impact of genetics, I guess when it comes to production and type, everybody understands the benefit that genetics have brought, and the cows we're milking today are very different than they were 20, 30 years ago. And certainly for those traits, I think there's no longer a question that genetics is important. It took us a while to get health traits embedded, and certainly when somatic cell count came along in the 90s, it took a bit of time really for the industry to get used to it. Lower heritability traits, it was believed that management was more important. But if we look at the semen that's being sold today, there's very few bulls nowadays that are positive somatic cell count or increase of somatic cell counts, and the industry has really caught on to the impact that somatic cell counts has and the genetics of it. The same was true for fertility index, which was available since 2005, and again initially a lot of discussion about, well, it's all management and we can't really breed for fertility. But again, if we look at the bulls today, we do know that it is difficult to sell a bull that's bad for fertility index, and the reason is really because we do know that once we start using good fertility index bulls, we do also see an improvement on the on-farm performance. And actually recently we did a bit of an analysis to say, well, could we have predicted the calving interval trend of the national population based on the genetics that are being used? And well, probably not as a surprise to us, but certainly it came as a bit of a surprise to some of the colleagues that we talked to. It's surprising when you start to plot these two on top of each other, how well the national trend is following our genetics. So on this slide here, it's looking at the year of calving for the national herd. The dotted line is our predicted calving interval based on genetics of the national herd. And then overlaying on top of it, we've got our actual calving interval. And of course, you see some year-to-year variation depending on what's going on. And maybe calving interval started to improve slightly earlier than genetics would have predicted, because we really started to focus on activity monitors and heat detection systems. But the underlying message is certainly there, that if we start to breed for improved genetics for fertility, that the results on farm will follow. And as a consequence, we do predict that by 2024, our fertility will be on par again to what we were in the mid-90s. And about a third of the improvement that we see on farm, we believe, are due to genetics. So even though the lower heritable traits, we can make big impacts once we start to breed for it. So with that in mind, we are really keen to fine-tune our breeding going forward. We have done the easy traits, the traits that are more heritable, where we had a lot of data. But with new data coming along and new knowledge, we can do a lot more. And that's really the 4 traits that I'll be introducing tonight. So mastitis, lameness advantage, calf survival, and the dairy carcass index are all new indexes launched in the last 12 months. And for all of those, we have got a good amount of data. So mastitis, for example, we have 4.5 million animal records that we can now make evaluations on. And for the others, we've got similar high numbers. The dairy carcass index, where we get data from abattoirs, is a little bit less because we look at prime slaughter age animals, and obviously most of our dairy cows don't fall into that bracket. But nevertheless, we've got a good amount of data that we can work with, and also there's a lot of beef and dairy crosses where the dairy component we can filter out genetically. So again, an index that's useful to have in a back pocket when it comes to breeding. So going through these traits just one by one. So mastitis index has now been available for about 12 months, and you may be familiar with its use already. Again, the data has been collected through milk recordings, so we use data from NMR, CIS, and Dale Farm in Northern Ireland. And that data, most of the time, is being picked up through the on-farm software systems, where farmers have recorded a treatment for a case of mastitis. And so that data then allows us to analyze it. And as I showed you earlier, we've now got about 4.5 million records, animal records, where we can look at the impact of mastitis. We evaluate it, and it's expressed in the same sort of scale as for somatic cell count. So we're looking for a reduction in mastitis, so negative are the good values. And the impact of the breeding values of the PTAs, the predicted transmitting ability, is significant. And this graph just illustrates what it is that's happening on farm. So if we look at the good mastitis bulls, around about -5, versus the very bad mastitis bulls, +5 or above, we can see a significant difference in the numbers of cases in the daughters of these bulls. We can see that happening on the first lactation already, that the bad bulls are showing more cases of mastitis, but it becomes much more dramatic once you get to the 3rd, 4th lactation animals. So breeding for mastitis is important if we want to reduce our numbers of mastitis cases on farm. And really, these are really the group of bulls we should be focusing on with the negative mastitis index. Now, using the mastitis index is really recommended alongside somatic cell count. So somatic cell count has been around for a long time, and we've made significant improvements as a consequence. But we do know that the traits are not the same, and we do find some bulls who are good for somatic cell count, but are still giving us an increased incidence of mastitis. And those are really the ones we want to filter out when it comes to bull selection. So here we see the bulls with somatic cell count on the x-axis. So our good somatic cell count bulls, remember, are negative, and we look for a reduction in somatic cell count. And we do find here some bulls that are negative for somatic cell count, so good for somatic cell, but they still increase mastitis. And so their genetics for mastitis are worse than for somatic cell count. And these are really the group of bulls we need to filter out and not use on farm, but instead really focus on the bulls that are N, good for somatic cell count, and good for mastitis. The second trait that we launched just this April gone is lameness advantage. Similar to mastitis, again, we pick up lameness events that are being recorded on farms through the milk recording systems. And alongside, we also have a vast database of type classification data being collected by Holstein UK. So we think about traits like locomotion, foot and leg composites, bone quality also being collected through the classification system. And alongside it, also, Holstein UK have also been collecting digital dermatitis. And that data all together really allows us to analyze lameness as a genetic index. And we have been able to come up with breeding values for this trait. Now, this trait is expressed on a -5, where negative is now bad, to +5. So we're looking for the higher advantage bulls because we want to make advancements in lameness. So it's a positive figure that we're looking for. And it's a percentage figure where the higher bulls will give us a reduction on lameness, or a greater resistance to fight off a lameness case. So the difference between the very best and the very worst is about a 10% difference in incidence of lameness in the daughters. Again, similar to mastitis, we recommend using this alongside existing traits. So up until now, the majority of farmers will have been selecting strongly for improved foot and legs, and that's still important. We still want to improve the conformation of the foot and leg. But we now can also see that actually there are some bulls out there who are good foot and leg bulls. So this is on the x-axis is now the foot and leg score. So they're good foot and leg, but they've got a poor lameness score. And it's really these types of bulls we want to filter out, or at least be aware of when we're using these bulls on farm, that we have to be careful which cows we're mating them to. But the advice would be to look for bulls that are good for foot and leg composite, but at the same time also have got a good lameness advantage score and therefore are improvers for lameness cases on farm. Then calf survival data from BCMS. So animals get an ear tag, and from that point onwards we can track them whether they survive on farm or not. And this index is looking at calving and tagging up until about 10 months of age, when we know the majority of calf losses occur on farm. Again, the data is analyzed and expressed on a percentage scale where the positive numbers are desirable. And this graph illustrates what happens to the progeny of these bulls who are good PTA calf survival bulls. We'll see a much higher numbers of daughters surviving on farm compared to the ones who've got a low PTA range. So really important to keep an eye on this, and really important to select bulls that are positive for calf survival. And then the final one, maybe not one that the majority of dairy farmers will immediately think about, but knowing that about 60% of the beef originates from the dairy herd, it probably is something that the dairy industry should be aware of. So we're taking data from abattoirs, we're looking at carcass conformation and average daily gain, and it's expressed on a -5 to +5 scale again, where the positive ones are of interest. Now, for all of these, we've also got fact sheets available, and so for further detail, I refer you back to our website where you can read up on it in a bit more detail. Also, on our website, you will find filter tools where you can actually find the bulls to suit you. And so this is a screenshot of our genomic young sires currently available in the UK, where we've got calf survival showing mastitis, lameness advantage, and dairy carcass index, and it allows you to filter on them, or to sort on them, whichever you like, or download them into an Excel file and you can play around with it. But really think about the traits you want to improve on your herd and make improvements that way. So that's really the 4 traits that I wanted to highlight to you tonight, but also now to think about what's coming up for the August proof run. And that's really the main thing that will change there is some updates to our profit ranking indexes. So think about our PLI, the Profitable Lifetime Index, our SCI, the Spring Calving Index. And alongside it, we will also be introducing a new autumn specific block calving economic index. Now, most of you will be familiar already with PLI, and SCI was launched in 2014, and certainly, well, so tonight we've got one farmer online who's a spring calver, and hopefully he or she will be familiar with the index. But the PLI and SCI, both of them are economic indexes, and they're specifically set up to suit UK economic conditions, where we look at a range of traits and say, well, what impact do they have on farm in terms of profitability? And really, it's a profitable driver to say, well, if we use the high PLI bulls, for example, we expect those progeny really to give us the highest return in terms of profitability on farm ultimately. And the detail of the graph, I'm not going to go into tonight. Again, there are fact sheets online if you want to look at the current PLI, but certainly before the August proof run, we'll produce new material that highlights the new changes. But the current PLI, roughly a third of the PLI is made up of production, and the rest of the traits are really to reduce the cost on farm. So fertility, for example, has got about a 20% weighting in the current PLI, and lifespan is the next big one at 14%. Similarly, with the spring calving index, specifically set up for spring block calving systems on the UK conditions, and it is important that we talk about UK systems. I know there's other indexes out there from other countries that are being used, but those will have been geared specifically to their home country economic conditions. Whereas it comes to the UK, we really should focus on a spring calving index specifically geared towards UK cost and also UK milk prices and milk contracts. So the SCI, very similar in terms of makeup of the PLI, but you will notice this block here, which is maintenance, and certainly for a spring calving index system, we're looking for a smaller animal, which we'll weight into the index. So why do we need profit indexes? Well, we've got many traits we evaluate bulls on. We've got 9 breeds we evaluate in the UK, and for all of those, we've got a lot of different traits that we evaluate. And really this table is just to illustrate the range of traits out there. And if we didn't have some way of ranking these animals in terms of profitability, it would be very difficult to decide for an individual farmer which bulls he or she should focus on. So the profit rankings really optimize the selection for a range of traits, and that optimization happens because we give relative economic weights to all of the traits of importance. And so what we want to do is maximize the gain in terms of pounds profit at minimum effort. And it's really an easy to use tool to rank your bulls, first of all, in the profit index, and then further on, you can fine tune for specific farm needs. The relative weights are based on an economic model developed by Abacus Bio and SIUC, and these results are discussed with our genetics advisory forum, which we run 3 times a year, made up of farmers and industry representatives, and they will have approved this. So we've looked at these profit indexes. The last update was in 2014, and periodically we just need to review the economic conditions, and because we've now got new indexes which we wanted to introduce, there's going to be a slight revamp of PLI. Correlations are high, 0.98, so it's not going to be a dramatic re-ranking, but we're going to include calf survival, lameness advantage, and also body condition score as 3 new traits in the PLI. Body condition score specifically because we do put quite a negative on maintenance, on body weight, and there was some concern that maybe we were breeding a frailer type of animal by doing that, and body condition score will help us to rebalance that. The new PLI will be slightly more yield orientated, so at the moment we give heavy negative penalties to high milk production bulls. In the new PLI there will be slightly less, but like I say, the majority of bulls in the top ranking won't really alter, but we will just cater for some of these new traits that we now have indexes for. SCI will be a slightly bigger change because we wanted to be a more extensive type index. We had some comments from the industry about some surprises on bulls that appeared on the SCI ranking, and we've listened to that concern, and so we will make the index a bit more extensive, if that's the right way of describing it. A little bit less emphasis on milk, but still very high components we want to breed for. Strong focus on fertility and smaller cattle, and again we'll introduce these 3 new traits in the SCI. And then the new index will be an autumn specific economic index. It will be similar to SCI in that it is in a crossbreed ranking, so you can immediately compare a Holstein against a Jersey, or a Holsteins against a Friesian, or some sort of Scandinavian breed. And that really helps our crossbreeding systems, which we do know block calving system are looking at in more detail. Emphasis will be very strong on fertility in that system and health traits. And again, milk components more so than milk yield. Slightly more weight on production than compared to the SCI, but less weight than the PLI currently has. So in summary, it is important that you understand the herd's genetic requirements. So if your own herd, or if you're an advisor, think about the herds you're working with. We've got some new traits now to help you improve or fine tune your breeding for the future. And I've highlighted the change that will happen in August, but before August, we will have more detail coming up in the press, and we will also produce fact sheets for it. So with that, I'll hand over to you again, Kate.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Marco. So just based on those new traits, might you be able to, in the audience, just select which traits are important for your herd, and you can tick as many as you like. Just waiting for a few votes to come in now. We're just at 40%. And this will just give us a really good indication about which ones are going to be most useful for people, or which ones might get used the most. Okay. And I think that shared the results now. So just on this, it's looking like udder health is going to be quite important for people, and then the lameness, calf survival and TB, and maybe dairy carcass advantage is more so for particular types of herds doing quite a bit of beef from dairy. So that's just really interesting for us to hear about. So thank you for that. Okay, so now we're going to pass over to Fern. So it won't be a second. Okay, Fern, so we just passed over to you. So thanks very much for joining us this evening. And might you be able to give us a bit of an introduction on yourself just before you go onto your slides, please? Oh, sorry, hang on, Fern. I just need to unmute you. Won't be a second. Okay, sorry, go on, Fern. You're unmuted.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Marco, for doing that first section for us. Yep, my name's Fern Pearston. I work with Marco in the animal genetics team and have been here for about 3.5 years, but this is my first webinar tonight, so hopefully it'll all go smoothly. But yeah, assist Marco with the genetic and genomic evaluations that hopefully you guys make the most of. So I'll be covering the optimal dairy system key performance indicator tool and also the herd genetic report. So just to give you a bit of a background on the optimal dairy systems, this was launched in September last year. And what we're doing is asking farmers to hold up a mirror to themselves and decide whether the system they're currently operating is the best one for them. As part of this, there's a document online that outlines the pros and cons of the systems, so all year round, spring or autumn block calving. But in addition, we've identified key performance indicators or KPIs for those systems in order to assist farmers in benchmarking and driving their progress. So this slide here kind of lists all the key performance indicators that we've narrowed our selection down to. But tonight we're just going to be focusing on the genetic merit ones. So going back to Marco's opening slide, performance is determined by management and genetics. So that's why we've felt quite strongly about genetics being one of those key performance indicators, as in order to drive performance, a key part of that is going to be the genetics. So knowing where you are and knowing where you want to get to is vital to that. So there's a bit more of a complicated situation with the genetic merit than maybe the other key performance indicators. So for autumn block calving and all year round calving, you'd be looking to use a profitable lifetime index, whereas the spring block calving, as Marco said earlier, you'd be looking to use the spring calving index. So I'm just going to take you through the tools and how to use that depending on what system you're on. So currently the method for calculating your herd's genetic merit is to access the herd standards tables through the herd genetic report. So the screenshot here is the landing page when you first log into your report, and this example herd just has Holsteins. So in an all year round calving, which is the first example I'll use at the moment, you'd go in, select the Holstein option. If there's multiple breeds, there'll be other breeds there as well if they're in the herd. And then once you're in there, one of the tables that you'll see is the herd standards. Now this table is an ideal way to benchmark your herd against all other herds that are milk recording in the UK. It easily identifies your herd's strengths and weaknesses across a range of traits, highlighted here by the yellow boxes. But for tonight's purposes, we're just going to look at the PLI and SCI columns because that's what you'll be needing for the KPI calculator. So in this example here, we'd be using the 10th percentile because that's where this herd falls into for the PLI. So then when you go into the KPI calculator, you'll be given the option of choosing your system. So we'll select the all year round calving option now. And you'd input in the genetic merit box 10% and click through to the comparison page. So this populates the 10% for you and then also indicates on the bar chart where your herd is sitting. So this herd, example herd, is sitting in the good performance area, which is great. And as I've mentioned, with the PLI, if there's multiple breeds in your herd, the PLI is a within breed index, so you would need to input each breed's own PLI percentile score, but that's fairly easy to do once you've got the herd genetic report. You just select the other breed, say how many cows are contributing to that PLI score or percentile score, and then it also input the percentile score. So numbers go in the top of cows and the percentile scores go in the bottom section there. And again, that'll calculate it for you and output it in the end sheet. So that's hopefully quite straightforward. So block calving, if we look at the autumn block, this process is going to be the exact same as the all year round process because you're using the PLI option there. So again, if you've got one breed or if you've got multiple breeds, there's options there for you to input their data. Finally, the spring block calving. This will be a similar process, but I'll just talk you through because it will be slightly different for the herd genetic report. So when you log into the herd genetic report, you'll end up selecting the SCI option. Because this is a crossbreed index, you don't need to break it down by breed. They're all expressed on the same base. And then within the report, again, you've got your herd standards table, looking at the SCI column. And with this example herd, we're in the top 25%. Again, input it into the calculator. And we've got 25 populated. And again, it's sitting just in the borderline of the good performance. So the good performance is anything that sits in the top 25%, average is 25 to 75%, and poor is the bottom 75%. With the benchmarking tables, if it's not highlighted at all in that column, it means that you're down in the 99 percentile, just for your information there. So although spring calving is all on one base, you don't need to break it down by breed. If you are a herd that has both spring calving animals and autumn calving animals, there is an option to put those into the calculator too. So again, similar to autumn block, when you've got multiple breeds, you'd pop number of animals in the autumn block in the top section of the autumn block boxes, and then their percentile scores, and then you just pop your overall SCI percentile score in the top there with the number of spring block animals that you have. So I've gone through one key feature of the herd genetic report, which is our benchmarking table, but there's a number of other features that I'd like to take you through tonight as well. So the first table that you'll encounter in the herd genetic report is our summary table, and this gives you the average genetic proofs for each lactation in your herd and each age group of your young stock. So in this table, ideally what you'd like to see is the genetics improving through the generations. So then you know that your breeding decisions are going in the right direction. You're breeding better animals generation on generation. We've also got some selection boxes on the side, and what this does is that alters the average at the bottom. So if you wanted to just look at your averages for your milking herd or your young stock, or a selection of lactations, then that's an option to do here as well. So just bringing your attention to a few buttons at the bottom of this table. We've got the young stock report there and the milking herd report. These are quite similar reports. They just differ in the milking herd showing a lactation number and young stock gives date of birth, but otherwise they're fairly similar. So for time's sake tonight, we'll just look at the young stock report as an example. So in this screen grab for tonight, I've blocked out the animal identities, but here what you can see is every animal's genetic proof, and it's either based on pedigree index calculation because it's a young stock animal, or a genomic proof if the herd is genomically testing. All of them are ranked by the profitable lifetime index or the spring calving index if that's the option that you've looked at in the herd genetic report. But you're also able to order the columns along the top here as well. And you can also filter the animals. So if you're looking at animals that are coming up to bulling, or if you're also looking to build on the health traits of the animals, then you can filter the records that way as well. what I'd like to just draw your attention to at the moment is the difference in reliability between animals that are genomically tested and those that have a parent average calculation. Genomically tested animals have a significantly higher reliability. In this example, they're 67% compared to 28 to 35% reliability for those that have a parent average calculation. And what this means is that these proofs, when we start to get milk recordings coming through for these animals, and it's based on their production information, we'd expect the genomic proofs to change by a smaller amount because they've got the higher reliability than the proofs that are based on parent average information. Those parent average proofs could fluctuate quite a bit. So what this means is that the information that you're making decisions on here, you can have a bit more confidence in based on the reliability that they've got right now. But final features on the on this page are the print download options, and then we also show inbreeding percent for all animals in the herd. Currently that's based on pedigree inbreeding, but we do have a project underway at the moment to look at calculating genomic inbreeding. So again, if you're genomically testing your animals, once we've got that in place, we should be able to do a genomic inbreeding calculation for those animals. So another feature that I'd like to highlight to you tonight is the herd sire list. And what this does is it lists all the bulls that you've used in your herd that still have daughters in the milking herd. So it ranks by the number of daughters that they've got in the herd. And this will help you to identify bulls that you've used quite heavily in the herd maybe, but whose daughters are lasting in the herd. And you can identify the genetics that works well for your system and your management and your style. There might be some bulls in there that you've used quite heavily and their daughters haven't lasted, so that kind of maybe brings a flag up that maybe those are the genetics that maybe aren't suited to your herd. As well, again, as ranking by the daughter count, you can also reorder it by the traits that are shown there. And similar to the other lists we show, we've got print buttons, download buttons, and comparison buttons at the top too. So the final feature tonight is the inbreeding checker. It's a little bit long-winded to go through, so that's maybe something for another night. What this does is it allows you to select females from your young stock list or your milking list that you're looking to serve and buy semen to serve. This will then allow you to select bulls from our available list or our top bull lists on the website and run those bulls against all of the females that you've selected and look at the resultant inbreeding of the progeny if you're to mate those bulls to those cows. So ideally what this tool does is it allows you to identify the genetics that you'd want to use in your herd. The herd genetic report allows you to identify those weaknesses and strengths so you can complement your herd's strengths and work on the weaknesses with the bulls, whilst also controlling the inbreeding level that you're getting in your next generation. So if you've not got a herd genetic report and you'd be interested in signing up for one, the information that we'd require to set you up with access to your herd genetic report is your business email address, your milk recording number, your trading name and business postcode. And if you were to send these through to the email breeding.evaluations@ahdb.org.uk, we get that set up for you. Just a point to make is that we do require farms to be fully milk recording, which means that they are recording on an ICAR approved scheme with a minimum of 5 times within a lactation. Don't worry if you don't meet these criteria or you're not milk recording at the moment. We are working on a tool and hopefully we'll be able to roll that out in the next couple of months where you can do a very rough calculation of your herd's genetic merit, so you can still use the KPI calculator. It'll just be a little while till we get that one out to you guys. So just as a summary from my side, benchmarking your herd genetics, you can use the herd genetic report and the KPI calculator, so you can know where you are at the moment and make those changes with your next breeding decisions to move your herd in the direction you want it to go in. Yep, as you're able to use the herd genetic report to identify your strengths and weaknesses there. But again, if you aren't able to get a herd genetic report at the moment, don't worry, there is a new tool coming out soon, and we will inform you guys when it's available. And just my final slide is just for further information. The first link is if you would like a herd genetic report or more information on that, or if you would like to give third-party access to your herd genetic report, such as a vet, consultant, breeding advisor. Second link is if you'd like information on the optimal dairy systems or KPI calculator. You can find that on the second link. And if there's any questions that we don't get round to tonight, mine and Marco's emails are at the bottom there. But I'll pass you back to Kate now.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you, Fern. And just to let you know that we've got all of the email addresses from this evening. So those links that have just been put on the screen, we'll send them out so that you can just click on them and have a look. And just to let you know as well that the presentation this evening has been recorded and it's going to be available to watch back on the AHDB Dairy YouTube channel. And we've also got all of our other webinars on there from the past few years. So we're going to go to some questions now, some Q&A, and we've got a few questions that have come up that we're going to run through. Just to let you know as well that all of the tools and the information that have been given on this webinar are all, the links are all there on the original email invite that was sent out. So things like the new trait fact sheet, the PLI and FCI indexes, the optimal dairy systems calculator, and the herd genetics reports. But we will send that out as a follow-up as well, so you'll have all that information together. So what we'll do now is we'll go to the first question. Let me just get Marco back online as well. So first question in this evening. So we've got one from Ben, and he's asked, do you think that the heritability of a trait can be more to do with poor data sometimes than to do with genetic inheritance? So, for example, things such as temperament and milking speed, could we collect data from milking machines in relation to milking speed? Is that something, Marco, would you be able to answer that one, please?
Yep, very good question. And yeah, certainly it's true that the better the quality of the data, the better the heritability of the trait is. Because essentially what heritability is it's a measure of how much of what we can see on farm can we assign to genetics. And so the better the quality of the data, the more precise we can pin really down onto what is it genetics and what's management. And so an example I gave earlier was fertility. And certainly when it comes to fertility, well, we do know that actually fertility is well, the impact of genetics on fertility is quite massive. But because recording of fertility is not as good as maybe some other traits, also because it's an all or none trait, so a cow is either in calf or not in calf, it sometimes makes it more difficult to really find that underlying genetic component and therefore the heritability. And yeah, the same would be true for milking speed and temperament. Temperament, maybe automated milking system is more difficult, but the milking speed, there may be an opportunity to collect better quality data. But having said that, even the data we've got today, because of the numbers of animals that we can evaluate, is good. But you're right, if we can get better quality data and more routinely coming through our system, we probably could do more. And it's certainly an area that we're interested in looking at in automated milking systems.
Okay, thank you, Marco. Right, we've got a couple of questions on the lameness advantage. So first one from Tony asking about the lameness advantage is it true that it mostly benefits in digital dermatitis? And what are the effects on horn disease and sole ulcers and white line? So how would it help with those aspects of lameness as well?
Yeah, very good question, very interesting one. And it's actually something that we've also looked into in quite a bit more detail. So at the moment, we've just introduced the lameness advantage as an overall composite index. But when we dive down into it, it's made up, the two components that are going into it are the horn-related diseases, so white line, sole ulcers, and digital dermatitis, as I showed as a separate trait. We have done some analysis where we've looked at the Nordic evaluations, where they've got some more specific PTAs. And we've also looked at the Dutch system, where they also give breakdowns on individual affections on foot and leg, so claw health. And what we actually find is that it's the lameness advantage index is probably slightly more correlated to the hoof related or the horn related diseases. And that's, so if we think about which animals are being recorded on farm by farmers as being treated, it tends to be the ones who've got a severe case of lameness, and you really got to pick up the foot to treat it. And that's typically the sole ulcers and those types of diseases. Whereas digital dermatitis it's usually more the treatment or general management on farm. But because we've also got digital dermatitis, that also correlates well. So actually in our index, we do pick up both sides of the spectrum quite well. And we do believe that by breeding for it, we can make improvements on both. But because we've also got an underlying digital dermatitis specific index, that is something we will be monitoring and whether that may be launched in future as a standalone trait.
So just to clarify, we had a question from Catherine asking about digital dermatitis. Are the figures taken of risk or proven cases? Is that where you said that both sides of that are covered? Sorry.
Yeah, so digital dermatitis is being collected through the classification system. So the classifiers from Olsen UK that come on farm, they will score cows who've got a case of digital dermatitis that they can see on farm. So it's actually all animals that are being affected as all a non-trait that we can include in the analysis.
Okay, all right, brilliant. Okie doke. So next question then. This is one based on if we are changing the base PLIs, could it perhaps devalue these because they are a long-term value within the indexes? And breeding is also a long-term process. So is it good that these are being changed?
Right. Yeah. So I mentioned it, but maybe not clear enough. So when we talk about the PLI changes and also SCI, they're tweaks rather than complete revamps. The big change we had in 2014 was probably more significant. This time around, we're tuning the system because we're introducing some new traits, but the overall correlation is it's about 98%. So the majority of animals that were high or that are high on the current PLI system will still be high under the new system, and so it's not a complete re-ranking of animals. But really, what we do in the Genetics Advisory Forum at AHDB is that we meet 3 times a year, and every time we look at the genetic trends, and once a year we look at the overall economic indexes and say, I'll do the current PLI, SCI still resonate when it comes to what type of animals we want to breed for the future. Up until now, every year we've re-looked at it and didn't feel there was a need. This time, because we are introducing 3 new traits, we felt it was an opportunity to just fine-tune some of those parameters that go into the evaluation. And so yeah, it's a fine-tuning rather than a complete revamp. Obviously, the autumn calving index is a unique one. And that was really there because of the optimal dairy systems where we recognize that maybe PLI isn't ideal for an autumn specific block calving system, and that's why that index will come along.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for clarifying. So question now, this could be one for Fern in relation to the KPI calculator. So in relation to crossbreeds, is it the sire breed or the dam breed that's selected when people are inputting data in the calculator? Could you confirm that maybe, Fern?
Yep, and Marco, correct me if I get anything wrong. So using the herd genetic report with the KPI calculator, if it's an all year round or block calving system where you're using the PLI, the cows will be assigned to their breed base based on the breed code that's been input with the milk recorders. So as long as these are correct, then the cows will appear on the appropriate breed base. With the spring calving, spring block calving system, that's not a worry because they all appear in on the same base.
Okay. All right, that's brilliant. Thank you, Fern. Right, question on genomics next from Sandy. And Sandy's asked, does PLI alone match the sequence of animals if genomic testing is done?
I'm trying to understand the question. So there's a sequence of animals. Sorry, say that again.
Yeah. Does PLI alone match the sequence of animals if genomic testing is done?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, but certainly, well, so what PLI will do is, or sorry, what genomics will do, it will look at the DNA markers. So it actually comes up with a profile specifically looking at the DNA of the animal, and then combines that with also a little bit of pedigree information, and then give a PLI. So what we typically find when we look at a group of animals, let's say somebody has genotyped 100 of the young stock, the average genetic merit on PLI doesn't really differ between the pedigree index and the genomic index. But what we do see is that there's a huge variation. So some animals are quite a bit better than parent average, and some are quite a bit worse. And if you think about it, it's well, pedigree index is basically half sire, half dam. And if you think about your own brothers and sisters, you can see a lot of variation. And really what genomics is doing is pulling out that difference and predicts which animal is going to be the better one. And what we do know, as Fern also highlighted when she was speaking, is that genomic prediction is a much better predictor of the future performance of that cow than the parent average is. So I hope that answered the question. If it isn't, then try again or send me an email after, and I'll try to answer it better.
Okay, all right, thank you, Marco. So question on calf survival figures now. How is the potential hybrid aspect of a dam and sire accounted for with that trait?
Yeah. So within our evaluation systems, and it's the same for calf survival as it is for all the other traits, we don't just do an analysis within breed, we actually include all the crossbreds. And as part of that evaluation, we have got correction factors for heterosis or the hybrid vigor. So we recognize if an animal is a crossbred, and there will be a correction for hybrid vigor to make sure that we assign really what is genetics rather than what's some sort of effect of hybrid vigor that comes through. So the analysis will take care of it. I probably should have also mentioned, which I forgot to do, and I apologize, is that when it comes to these new traits, currently in April, we only introduced it for the Holstein breed, but we hope to introduce these breeds in the August evaluations. So when it comes to PLI, we can include lameness, calf survival, etc., also for the non-Holstein breeds.
Okay, another question on calf survival. Does calf survival only record calves once they're registered with a BCMS, or even when calves are dead before registration?
Yeah, so unfortunately at the moment we haven't got a good system in the UK where we can pick up calves who are born and not registered with BCMS. So yeah, it is only from once the animal is registered with BCMS that we know about it. We are re-looking at it to see whether there's another way of identifying well, which animals are still born on farm, but unfortunately currently we haven't got that data.
Okay, all right, well this is a last comment, and I think it just relates to what the answer that Fern gave earlier, and it was just a comment about pointing out that if an animal is non-pedigree, then the default breed code is from the sire. I think, is that in respect to talking about the selecting from the herd genetic reports, perhaps?
Yeah, that sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, so typically the milk recording company will default the animal to the sire breed. But the farmer can overwrite it if it's a crossbred. If a farmer decides, well, he wants all of his animals appearing on the Holstein scale, they can assign it the Holstein code. Because within the evaluation system, we recognize the breeds of the parents, and we'll actually make proper corrections for the hybrid figure, as I explained earlier. So that breed code of the animal is only really used for deciding on which list it is displayed.
Okay, that's brilliant, thank you. So just last one then, in relation to the PLI again. How does UK PLI and American TPI differ?
So in the US, there's two indexes. They've got the TPI, which is more of a production type index, and they've also got net merit, which is a dollar value. So what we actually find is that PLI is probably closer linked to the net merit, a real economic dollar value index, as compared to TPI. TPI is quite a different index. It's not not a pure economic index. It's got a lot of the similar sorts of traits in it, but it's more of a desired gain set up by the Holstein Association in America, and therefore is a different ranking. But again, when it comes to selecting animals that are suitable for UK condition, you should always look at the UK rankings. So look at PLI, look at SCI, or the new autumn index that comes up, because those are designed specifically to our milk contracts and our costs on farm. And so it is different than the TPI, and you can't really compare the two.
Okay, all right then. And just last one that's come through to finish off then, but it is an interesting one, so I thought we may as well just cover it. And it's just about the calf deaths again. So if calves are stillborn and they're lost in the calf survival value, could this affect the data because we're not including them, but they are the ones that are, you know, making up the data of the majority of deaths? I wondered if you had any comments on that.
So the calf survival index is specifically looking at animals that are tagged, so they are alive and well, look healthy, but then die. And unfortunately, we do know that there's still quite a lot of animals that don't make it into the milking herd after they've been born healthy and started the rearing. And really, it's those animals that we're trying to get to grips with in this calf survival index. So it doesn't devalue the index, it's just a different index. And stillborn is probably genetically a different trait to the animals that we're looking at in the calf survival index, which is healthy animals that are born normal, but then still die. So there could be scours, pneumonia. There's probably a whole host of reasons why calves don't make it into the milking herd. And it's really that part that we're trying to tackle with this index. But as I said earlier, we are keen to look at stillbirth as a separate trait, and we are investigating whether there's a way of collecting the